All right. This is Pat Pettit. We're going to do our first rock and roll interview today. So, question number one: what city, state did you grow up in?
I grew up in Windham, Ohio. Now, you want to know where I was born and what?
Sure.
Okay, I was born in Warren, Ohio, December 10th, 1956. Grew up primarily in Windham, Ohio, though I lived for a while in Kent and also in Garrettsville. So I grew up in a few different places, all geographically within 50 miles of each other. So.
Awesome. What year did you graduate from high school?
1975.
Awesome. Right in the middle of the 70s. All right, so what kind of music was popular during those years?
Well, where I'm from, the popular music, of course, with Kent State University being close proximity, a lot of protest music, a lot of folk music, and of course the early beginnings of acid rock and pop.
Okay. Do you remember any specific artists or groups that may have impacted you on your high school years and early years?
Sure. Led Zeppelin, Black Sabbath, of course the Beatles before that, Rolling Stones. I like a lot. Dave Clark 5. I could name a whole bunch, but they're cover the area pretty well. Right. Rock and roll, acid rock, what we call heavy metal now. So.
You said something about folk music. Do you remember Bob Dylan being very big?
Yeah, Bob Dylan, very huge.
Acid rock, like who would that be? What artist? Grateful Dead or Pink Floyd?
Pink Floyd more than Grateful. I wasn't really a Deadhead.
Okay.
I like Pink Floyd to a certain. Actually, you know, Jimi Hendrix.
Yeah.
Okay. Was big and still is, as far as I'm concerned.
Right. Definitely. Janis Joplin was pretty big.
Yeah. Me and Bobby McGee.
Yeah. All right. So next question: how much did you pay for an album or a single, and when you brought music, did you generally buy the whole album or just the single?
I never bought singles.
Never bought singles.
Always albums. I got $8 or $9 for. I seem to recall paying $9.89. Of course, I was buying a PX or a commissary or a PX
on
a military basis. A lot of the stuff, but I was getting double albums for $8 or $9. So
that's not bad. So how did you hear about new music? On the radio, TV, magazines, friends?
All of the above.
All of the above?
Yeah.
Your friends and you listen to a lot of
Now, I did majority of I probably spent a few $1,000s in the year 78 to 80 while I was in Germany on albums that I paid for with poker winnings. If that's what's funny. But and I bought a new stereo, an old rack stereo system, and I've got 300 albums in my house still that I bought primarily, most of them in Germany those 2 years.
Wow.
Never used any of my own money.
Did you attend any live concerts, and can you describe what those were like at the time, like cost, length, security, beverages, drug use?
Yeah, I attended a few. I saw, let's see, in Montgomery, Alabama. I was stationed there from 76 to 78. I saw the Doobie Brothers, the Eagles, and Styx.
Three big artists from the 70s.
Tommy Shaw, one of the members of Styx, is from Montgomery, Alabama. When I first got there, he was playing in a place called Keckler's Cove, which is a club on the side of a bowling alley in downtown Montgomery. So we used to go see him all the time. I actually knew him a little. And then he joined Styx, and one of the first places they played on their Grand Illusion tour was Montgomery, because that's where he's from. And so, of course, we had to go see that. But, that was cool.
Any other memorable concerts you went to in the 70s?
Saw Led Zeppelin in Germany in 1979 at Ludwigshafen, the ice arena, seats 100,000 people.
Wow.
It was packed. And they were carrying people out on the stretchers. Oh, damn. I also saw Ted Nugent at the same place. That might have been in 1980. That might have been early 1980. Can't really remember. And then the big, every year the U.S. military in Germany would throw a big open-air concert at the soccer stadium in downtown K-Town, Kaiserslautern. Okay. And they would bring in several bands. Now I worked security because I was a cop.
Right.
I worked security at the one it was actually 1980. It was June 1980. My God, Bob Marley, Jay Giles, my God, I'm going crazy. Can't think of the name of the band. Rumors was the name of the album they did. It made them famous, but I can't think of the name.
Not sure.
Oh shoot! Yeah, you are. You would know exactly what I'm talking about. I'm just fuzzing out at the moment. And then I've seen the Rolling Stones, Jay Giles again, and Prince at the LA Coliseum when I was in California. In an all-day concert.
So what, like the price of those concerts and how long do they go for?
Well, most of the ones I mentioned earlier they may have a warm-up band and then one other group, the main group, and they probably last 3 to 4 hours. The one in LA I was just talking about, that lasted for 8. Now, of course, I've been to the California Jam. That's multiple days, and you just go for a particular day to see a particular artist that you want to see. I've seen lots of groups there.
Were tickets to those concerts very much?
Compared to today, no. But for their time, they weren't cheap.
What about security? They have those concerts and that?
They were covered pretty good, yeah, you might say. There was plenty of drug usage, just the same.
And alcohol, so.
Well, you had to sneak the booze in for most of them, but you usually got drunk before you got in, so it didn't really matter.
Okay. So, what kind of music did your parents listen to or like when you were growing up?
Mostly country.
Okay.
Yeah, unfortunately.
Do you remember any specific artists?
Well, no, I don't think so much that. Whispered Bill Anderson, Lynn Anderson. I can't even remember most of their names because I don't like country music all that much. But
no,
well, those are the two people we went to. Wheeling, West Virginia used to have a radio station, WWVA. Don't know if they still do it or not. They every weekend they'd have a live show that they telecast on the radio, but you could go see it in person if you punted up the money for the tickets. That would be. We went to see him one time, and that was actually who was playing was Bill Anderson and Lynn Anderson. They're not related, but they played the same show. And one other guy I can't think of. And then of course there's like Roy Clark and
right.
hee-haw people.
So how did your parents feel about the music you were listening to when you were growing up? Rock and roll at the time?
Didn't say a word about it.
Didn't?
No.
They're pretty open to it also.
Yeah.
What, if anything, was considered controversial about the popular music of the time? And are there any specific events or personal memories that stand out to you?
Well, I mean, for its time, I mean, comparatively, the music then compared to now is pretty tame. But at that time, it was pretty controversial because there was a lot of sexual innuendos, also the drug use, and then even something like the Rolling Stones in "Sympathy for the Devil." Bible thumpers got crazy about that. So there's a lot of it going on. You can pick and choose as to what you consider to be controversial and what not, but it's all music.
Right. Do you remember, so like you said, the Rolling Stones, when they released Sympathy for the Devil, great track, I like that song. Do you remember in the 60s, whenever John Lennon said that the Beatles were bigger than Jesus?
I sure do. Quite an uproar over that one.
Yes. But yeah, definitely those two big groups, I could see that standing out. What kind of music or musical, social, or cultural trends did you see in popular music as you grew older? Did you like what was happening? Like, because the '70s progressed into the '80s, and
Well, they build on each other. The thing I like the best about our music, my generation's music coming up, okay, was that it evolved, but it still stuck to its background, its roots. It was true to that. And there was a lot of originality. The thing I have a problem with contemporary, if you want to use that word, music today is it's cookie cutter.
right.
There's no originality to it. And the thing that I liked was a lot of originality, a lot of variations, a lot of variety.
Awesome. I agree with you, and I think that it becomes very saturated. A lot of the same sounds, people just trying to put their own little twist on it today. So a lot of the music in my generation isn't, rap is big and it all kind of sounds the same.
I'm sorry, I don't consider that music.
Yeah, it's.
I mean, that's an old man talking there. But if they're not singing, if you want to listen to poetry or political commentary, you can go to a coffee house.
Fair
I don't want to listen to it.
So, are you familiar with the popular music of today in 2020? If yes, like what bands?
Not much of it.
None of it. Do you enjoy any music and why? If no, you can pinpoint when and why you lost interest in the current.
Well, just because, like I said, it started sounding the same. I mean, when I'm growing up, I could listen to a group and not have to see it. I could tell you who it was just from their sound. Okay, even if I'd never heard the song before, I could generally tell you, who that was because they were distinct sounds. Okay, they had their own way of doing it. If Eddie Van Halen's playing guitar, it's him. Okay, if Janis Joplin's singing, it's her. Okay, if Bob Dylan's singing, nobody sounds that bad. Okay, and you still have people listen to him.
Right.
All right, he couldn't sing a lick, but he was a great performer.
No. Great lyrics too.
Woody Guthrie, he comes with the same line. So, it's just nowadays I can listen to it. They all sound the same, exactly the same. Not any difference.
Yeah. So, is the music that you enjoyed while growing up still music you enjoy listening to today? Like, assuming the answer is yes.
Yes, very much.
Do you think you generally love the music, or is it more just nostalgic memories? If the answer is no, why do you like the music? Why don't you like the music anymore? Which you just said yes.
I definitely still love it. So.
You love the music. I agree. With my friends and I growing up, we were influenced by classic rock a lot. 70s, 80s, even back to the Stones and the Beatles in the 60s, and that's still half of what we listen to most of the time. So
it just depends on the mood I'm in as to what if I'm in a weird, let's have some loud, obnoxious music, might listen to Sweet, okay, Ballroom Bash, it just depends on the mood.
So I want to ask you another question. This was brought up in one of our discussion boards for the class. So in the 60s, even before that in the 50s, so Elvis Presley, huge artist, he's going to remain legendary for years to come. I think, he was popular in the 50s and he's already dead and gone, but people still talk about him all the time. Like you see Elvis impersonators and stuff. And then in the 60s, you have the Rolling Stones, which are still touring, which is crazy.
Yeah,
it's
Grandpa's.
Mick Jagger.
Really.
Still gets around.
Well, he's the youngest one of the bunch,
Well.
Okay, that's why he can still move. The rest of them have to stand still.
And then, people remember them forever. The Rolling Stones are legendary. And also the Beatles, they made such an impact, but...
They changed music.
Definitely.
Okay, in this country in particular.
What about the 70s? So a lot of people say there's no particular artist that stands out in the 70s like the 50s. You had your Chuck Berrys and Little Richard and those guys. But
I don't necessarily know that there's a bunch of single artists that stood out, but there were a lot of
bands.
The Turtles, they did a lot of nice stuff. The Association. It's a little milder music, but it. I knew Buddy Bennett, the drummer for for the Turtles. He was a social worker when the band broke up. I'm not going to go into that, but another part of my life. But there's just lots of good bands, but not so many maybe single performers.
So, do you think any of those bands will remain legendary? I wrote that
in the 70s?
Led Zeppelin was probably, in my opinion, most influential because you still see, apparel. You still
if you poll 100 people my age or thereabouts, okay, what the greatest song of all time from that genre of music, and it's going to be "Stairway to Heaven" by Led Zeppelin. I mean, it's just the way it is. I mean, that was the theme for 1,000 high school proms for 3 or 4 years, including mine. So, I mean, that's just.
You think Led Zeppelin too? I know some people, would argue. Guys like Stevie Wonder, he was huge. Elton John.
Stevie was terrific.
Yeah.
Okay, no question. He was maybe the most talented, versatile singer of his generation. I mean, he's just badass. Okay, I mean, he is. Love his stuff. And then you go with somebody like, you go sideways a little bit and go to Billy Joel.
Yeah.
Okay, love his stuff. I mean, they're two talented single performers, different style of music. It's still great. Just depends on your mood.
Maybe the reason that people say that about the 70s because there were so many great artists. It's hard to have one that kind of stands out for that generation, depending on what kind of music you listen to, because there were so many different types. And a lot of good bands, like you said, the Eagles were huge, the Who, Led Zeppelin, Elton John was big, the Skinner, not as big, but there's just a lot of
Skinner would have been that big if they hadn't crashed and burned,
for sure.
I think. They were the quintessential Southern rock band. Okay, Atlanta Rhythm Section wasn't bad either. But, they were the best at that time, and they just didn't get a long run.
All right. Well, I think that wraps up the interview. I appreciate your time and your effort in this. I can tell you, it was a good time. The 70s was probably a great
good time
10 years to grow up in. So
good time to grow up.
Right.